Hello, everyone. Welcome to Lexington, Massachusetts. Perhaps I shouldn't welcome you because you are local, but I am loving being here. I am staying with friends, and I'll tell you a little bit more about my friends showing me this beautiful town, and I'm really loving what I call quaint and charming experience. I know you had a lot of snow as well. My name is Omid. I'll be with you tonight. I'm so thrilled to be able to talk about my book and what I have done, why I wrote this book, and what I hope to achieve with this book, and what I hope you get out of this book. And just a brief background about who I am. I live in Seattle. I have one of those immigrant stories where you're shipped off to be a doctor, engineer, attorney, the kind of that setup. So my first career was in biotech, and then to my mother's perhaps dismay, I decided to leave biotech and decided to go to cooking school, and I pursued food, and I did that for many, many years until one day I took yet another sharp turn, and I decided to be a psychotherapist. And so that's my I went to school for that. No, thank you for clarifying that. Yes. So that's what I do on my kind of 8 to 5 jobs, but I still love food and teaching, and it felt like it was really important for me to talk about Iran, to talk about its cuisine that is often underrepresented, as well as the culture that is unfortunately misrepresented. So I do a little bit here and there what I can, much like many other prominent friends that do amazing work in the field. I'm going to prepare 2 quintessentially Iranian dishes. You're going to help me with preparing these 2 dishes. One is, as you mentioned, rice is the foundation of our cuisine. We put a lot of our rich, aromatic, flavorful stews on top of this rice, something to soak it up. And Iranians eat hefty amount of rice, and I'm going to give you actually a whole rice story when we get to rice making. But know that we're going to make rice the very traditional Iranian approach. And then a classic stew that originates from the Caspian Sea region of Iran, where pomegranate trees are abundant, walnuts grow beautifully, and so this stew is, I often think about it as really light on ingredients, but really exceptional reward with very little effort. So it is a chicken cooked in a pomegranate walnut sauce. It is exactly that. There's no other mysterious ingredients in there that make it somehow. The look of it looks much like a Mexican mole sauce, but the flavor has nothing to do with mole sauce. So you will just have to taste it and find out how it tastes to you. So Persian food is not fast food. So that means things simmer, boil, cook for a while. So that is my own cue to actually get you to start, dice onion. I need you to dice onions. And I think most cuisines of the world starts with the onion. I know we all have different relationship with onion, so if it's not agreeable with you, just really trim it down, cut it down. But know that Iranian dishes always start with onions. That said, I'm going to give you knives and cutting boards. So I'm just going to put it out here and hope not to voluntold anyone so that you can just, I know, it's really exciting, dicing onion. It just doesn't get any more, right? So the recipes are obviously in the book, and what I am making is a 3 times batch. So the recipe asks for 1 onion, so I'm tripling everything that we're cooking. So if the volumes look extraordinary, that doesn't mean that you're going to go home and make that much. Your amazing dicing skills, we're not going to see. So all I want is just smaller dice rather than bigger dice. That's all I want. Okay, so while we get the onions going, I'm going to start searing the chicken. My preference for chicken is thighs, particularly with this dish. If you use breasts, they tend to dry up a little bit because it cooks for such a long time. So that's my preference. I have some chicken thighs prepped. Prep meaning I pulled it out of the package, patted it dry, so that it's just ready to go. And so not only we're going to have onion in the air, we're also going to have fried chicken scent in the air. So let's get started. And the reason I have, again, multiple pans in front of me is because I'm increasing the quantity, that's all. So to sear chicken, obviously chicken has its own skin and it has a lot of good fat in it, but you need just a little bit of the oil to get the process started. Wow, excellent. Thank you very much. Well done. And for this, I'm going to use a reasonably neutral oil, avocado, canola, safflower, whatever you consider a neutral oil, that's what we're going to use. And my preference always is to get the pan just a little heated, then you add the oil. When you do that, the oil spreads and you know the right amount that is actually needed. When you take an oil that is cold, you chug it in there, you're probably adding a little bit more oil than you normally need. So, and chicken has a little fat in it. So there's some oil. My preference when I sear chicken is always skin side down, render some of the fat, and once the fat is removed and seared on one side, then I flip it over. I always refer to it as I'm not a flip-flopper. I rather just let it do its thing, and then once that first side is seared, then you switch to the second side. All right.
Are they bone in?
They are bone-in, skin on, and that is always my preference. You absolutely don't have to eat the skin, obviously, if you don't care for it, but I always like the amount of fat that it adds to the dish. This comes in handy at the end of the dish, when I will tell you how you brag about this dish as to how tasty it is. It has something to do with the amount of oil, but I'm going to hold that as incentive for you to stay the whole class. Okay, so the onions are diced, thank you. And the chicken is going in. I hope without overcrowding it, trying to get everybody in. This one is non-stick so that it actually helps. I can put more in there, whereas that one, I don't want to too overcrowded, but looks like I'm splitting it all evenly in both pots. Okay, now what I like to do is get another pan to saute the onions. And again, the reason I'm using all these pans because I am working with large volumes. That will be the last time I will explain myself as to why I'm dirtying up so many pots and pans. So here's another pan, heat it up. A little oil, a little bit onion. Okay, we are eventually getting to the bottom of all the onions. Okay, give the onions a stir. There's nothing to do with the chicken because we're not flip-flopping. We're just searing on one side, right? And that is getting really hot. So I need to drop the temperature, give it a touch more oil. Recipes are in the book, but recipes don't always account for that your flame was a little too high for the first 30 seconds. So I always prefer to just look and listen and let the pot or the pan tell me what stage am I in, what do I need to do. That looked like it was getting stuck. I'm not measuring the oil. I'm having some good sense that I don't want too much oil added, but that was sticking, so I added just a touch more oil. I call that more like intuitive cooking. Listen, observe, see what the pots and pans are telling you, and respond to them. Okay, so that's going to do its thing. We got 3 things going on. Let's start a 4th thing, because that is how cooking goes. So this is obviously the onion and the chicken component of the dish. The other component of the dish are the walnuts. And the walnuts need to be grounded. So I have whole walnuts out of the shells that I'm going to put in a food processor and pulse it enough times such that the way I like it is like a coarse, a fine mixture. So when you touch it, you should feel a little grittiness, but not chunks. Know that different families have different traditions. I think that is fair to say about Iranian cuisine. Regional, familial influences dictate how you serve your food or how you prepare it. In my household, we would feel the texture of the walnut. We will never be chewing on it. Nor would I have, some families actually put it in a blender, make a walnut cream, and they cook it that way. I don't like it that way because my mommy didn't make it that way. So that is quite simple as that. Should I flip-flop? No, I don't know. No, I shouldn't, right? But let's check. Nope, it's not ready to release, so there's nothing to do. That gives me more opportunity to start yet another thing. So, here's our food processor, and I think I can do it all in one setting, but let me get started first with the first bowl. Starts blending, then I really would like for you to pulse it so that you have a sense of how far it's going and not over processing it. So I will pulse it until I can stick my hand in there and touch it to see if I can just get a fine grit. What's a good, like a cornmeal, like something of that texture is what I'm looking for. And that is more coarse than I want it to be, so I just need to go a little bit more. Meanwhile, listening to the sound of onions and chicken, doesn't seem like anything is in trouble, so this will continue. Okay, now might be a good time again to check the chicken. That could go a little bit more still. That one is ready. So at this stage, we're not cooking the chicken, we're just searing it. We're rendering the fat, coloring the skin, building flavors, and then this chicken is going to cook in the pot for 2 hours, a while. Okay, looks like most of them aren't ready yet on that one. And this one still got more to do. Okay, back to the onion. Sautéing onion is such a tradition. Most of our dishes start with onions, and it is quite frequent. Certainly in my household, what I do is saute a whole lot of onions, keep them in a container in the refrigerator so that when I'm preparing an Iranian stew, I've already shaved off 15 minutes from the start. So if the stew is going to take 2.5 hours, 15 minutes is going to be a substantial time to save. So, because I also know I'm going to use it within a week anyway. Okay, nowhere to go but to go back and do more walnuts. Finish that, and then we'll talk about the pomegranate molasses part of this dish. Okay, so things are starting to get where I want them to go. So when you're using a non-stick pan and you try to flip, or a regular pan, and it's stuck, what do? You exert, you push, you pull, and inevitably it's going to get stuck. So the best thing to do is actually remove it from the heat. Just let it sit, and that will really help for the chicken to release itself. So instead of pushing and pulling and fighting with it, I'm just going to not do anything. So they're flipping a lot easier now. And what I'm going to do is take it all out and pile it into one pan. So if you are watching the fat intake in your diet, by all means, take a good look at the fat that is rendered from the chicken and you decide how much and if you want to keep any of it. In a more traditional Persian home, that is not a consideration. You just proceed to the next step. But if you want to eliminate some of that, know that you can. All right, so that's done. The onions are where I want them to be. So now it's a matter of the one more step. Some families with the walnuts, they first toasted in the oven to build layers of flavor before grinding it and taking it to this point. Or what I like, maybe it's just sheer laziness or mainstreaming the effort, I saute toast it in the pan for 2-3 minutes until it picks up a little hint of toastedness. That way, it just feels like I've expedited the process one more time. And that is, again, have always been my goal is to make Persian food a little bit more accessible, because if I wanted to write the way my mother would cook, I think people would get, I think it's intriguing, it's delightful, it's charming, but it's also 5 o'clock and dinner needs to be ready and it's a Tuesday night. So I wanted to create dishes to preserve the DNA of the cuisine, but make it more inviting and inspiring for folks that maybe haven't had exposure to Persian food before. Okay, so back, giving in this some heat. And the walnuts, you really got to be careful. You don't want to do this over high heat because they could easily burn. And walnuts are rich and natural fat on their own. But at this stage, what will happen is kind of becomes, gummy is not necessarily a word you ever want to use to describe food, but it becomes moist and it becomes comes together, shall we say. And all you're doing is stirring it, making sure you get a little hint of toasting, and that's when you know it's ready to go to the next stage. And the next stage in this point, it is assembly. So to assemble, all we need is salt and pepper and water to make a stew, and then pomegranate molasses. And this is a piece that I really wanted to talk about while this is roasting. No 2 bottles of pomegranate concentrates or molasses or syrup. You can buy them in so many different labels. Ultimately, what I look for is I look at the label and see if it is on the cleaner, purer side of ingredients. I want to see pomegranate, I want to see water, and if it has sugar added, I'll learn to live with it. But I certainly don't want, there's a brand that I used earlier that has caramel in there, and I made this dish and it was just like, why is this so off tasting? Well, caramel is not part of this dish whatsoever. So I look for brands or jars or bottles that offer more of a pure experience. That said, your recipe says pour half a cup of pomegranate molasses, but one brand versus another brand is going to have different sweet or sour profile. So I always indicate in the recipe that start with a half a cup, cook it for a while, then you need to taste it. You always need to taste your food, and then see if you're getting a pomegranate forward flavor. If you're not getting it, start adding a tablespoon of pomegranate more at a time until your palate is satisfied with that flavor profile. Some families like it on the sweeter side, and some families like it on the tartar side. In my household, it was a little confusing because I think my dad liked it on the sour side, and my mom liked it on the sweet side, and I think just because she cooked the food, we ended up getting more on the sweeter side of it. But know that there's such a variance around the preference around the amount of sugar that may go in there. And if you taste this and you think it still is on the sweeter side for you, consider adding a touch of lemon juice to it. That just pushes it back onto the tart side. Okay, we're almost set there. So while all of this is coming together, what I think I'm going to do is keep this over here and start heating up the water that I'm going to need for making rice. So thinking a step and a half ahead, and we'll completely cover all of this. So no need to worry about it yet. And I'm going to boost this temperature up now that that's all there is left to do, so I can just focus on this and stir it and make sure nothing is burning. All of this that I'm going to put into the pan. This is our walnuts and onion. And I'm going to add water and pomegranate molasses. And I think I need 2 pots. This will be very dense and thick, so I accounted for that. So I'm going to divvy up the chicken. Actually, before I add the chicken, I'm going to add the pomegranate molasses. Pretend I'm measuring things. At the end, I will taste and make sure that it's good. And I have another pot. There it is. I don't want to cook it in this frying pan because it is such a wide surface, and this is going to cook for 2 hours. This is a thick sauce, and the more surface area it has, the more opportunity for it to settle in the bottom and burn. And this is one dish where you absolutely have to, every once in a while, make sure with a wooden spatula, go underneath to make sure nothing is sticking to the bottom. Because after all this effort and investment in ingredients, you don't want to burn anything. So now we have 2 pots of more or less the same thing. What else have I not added in here yet? Anybody tracking on my recipe? Chicken, right. That one is right there. But there is the thing you add to every dish. Salt and pepper, right. Salt and pepper. Good old salt and pepper. And this is, of course, precise measurement. I'm sure that is exactly right. But the beauty of it is that you will taste and you will adjust and you will continue to taste and adjust until it fits your palate. Okay. Oh, look at all that chicken juice and fat, and I'm going to keep it all in here because I think now I can tell you why that's important. One way Iranians brag about how good their stew is that you would say, hey, friend, come over. I made Fesenjoon. It's got that much oil sitting on top of it. That's a good sign of a stew that is not shortchanged of its fat and it's been cooked properly. And I guess we can define properly to mean, in this case, with all the oil preserved in there. So I will split the juice and the fat between the 2 pots. And now, if it was indeed the magic of television, we could have fast forwarded 2 hours for it to be ready, but in this case, I don't have that magic. We just have to be patient and keep cooking it. You don't cook it at this temperature. This is very low heat. It's going to cook for a while until the sauce has emerged and developed and the oil is beginning to surface to the top. And that inevitably is about a couple hours.
Omid, is that thick?
This is not thick. Again, this is the challenge. One brand is thick, the other brand is not. It is so important. Taste it, unlike me. If this was a short-term cooking, I'd say yes, more. But the fact that this is a really lengthy cooking process, the amount of liquid in these bottles will become secondary because it just would have evaporated and they all will become the same. We just want to make sure at the end of the cooking it has given you good amount of pomegranate experience. You remind me, I will try to remind myself to every once in a while, go around and give it a stir on the bottom so that nothing is sticking. I have burned it, and it's not a good experience. You've invested a good amount of time preparing it, and walnuts are so rich and dense. This is not a broth. It's going to be cooking down to a thicker and thicker and thicker sauce, so you want to make sure your flame accounts for the fact that there's not a lot of liquid in there. Okay, so now we're going to talk about rice. So I'd like for you to remember 2 words when cooking Iranian rice. Light and fluffy. Light and fluffy. Light and fluffy. So when you repeat that and know that, I think that could then orient you to when you're stirring it, you don't do anything like it. You're not making risotto. You're not actively trying to get the starch out and to get it to kind of come together in a sticky form. We need our rice to be light and fluffy. To make rice light and fluffy, however, there has to be things that you do to it to make it fluffy. First, you start with the right grain of rice, right variety of rice. The right variety of rice for us is long grain. What are some of the long grain rice that you know? Jasmine, yeah. Basmati, right. So jasmine is beautiful. It's so aromatic. It's so wonderful. Sometimes I use that when I'm making rice pudding, but on my day-to-day cooking for rice, I typically reach for basmati. Basmati rice cooks to be light and fluffy. It is nutty, it is long grain, it has all the things that we're looking for. So to make it light and fluffy, there are a few things you can do to help it along. What I have here is I've soaked it. So I put it in a nice body of water. It's not measured, I just soaked it. You would want this to soak for about an hour. Make that as the minimum, or you can go 3, 4, 5 hours. It's not going to get ruined. So rice, it naturally has starch in it, and when you soak it, the outer layer of starch actually comes out a little bit. And what does starch do? Thickens. What are the 2 words we need for Iranian rice? Light and fluffy. The 2 are in direct contrast, right? So we definitely want to soak it and then take it to the sink and rinse it a time or 2 or 3, and I think some people say till it runs clear. I don't know about you. I don't have that much time left in that. I'm just going to rinse it a couple of times and say that is washed away some of that starch. So now this is ready while my pots are not ready yet. This is a gentle simmer. That's good. I'm getting obviously a lot of aroma coming up, and eventually you will get some of that pomegranate coming at you. We want bubbles, but we don't want boiling. And I'm going to add my rice. Okay, so we will stay here. How long? It will come to a boil first. Then you just wait 5, 6 minutes. The best thing to do is to grab some with a spoon, grab a piece of rice out and look at it. The grain should be elongated. It should be very aromatic, but above all, you want to get a little bite of it. And if it is, to borrow a delightful term from Italian cuisine, you're looking for al dente, right? It's not Persian language reference, but I think everybody gets al dente, so that's what I use. We want just a little bit of bite to it. I don't want soft, nor do I want crunch. When it reaches that level, then I carefully pick this up, take it to the sink, and drain it in here. So once it's drained, then we'll go through the next steps of it. I don't think you need it to come here for me to show you how to boil rice in water and salt. So I wanted to demonstrate more complex form of it and also get an opportunity to crush some saffron and to show you saffron and talk about saffron a little bit so that you have a better understanding. What is this thing we call saffron? What is this thing we call saffron? Where does it come from? And why is it so expensive? It is the stems, the stigma of the crocus flowers. We rarely just pick up saffron and put it in our dishes. That, to us, is my word for it. It's almost like sacrilegious. I can never do that. I always have to crush it. When you crush it, you get more surface area. When you have more surface area, you get more aroma, color, and flavor coming out of it. So that's what we want to do. So this is a mortar and pestle from Iran. And so it's smooth surface, and you definitely want to use something like this. You don't want something porous because your saffron is going to get lost in there. And when you paid precious dollar for this, you want to make sure that you don't lose it. So you pick up the saffron and you crush it. It's just dried little pieces of thread. It takes very little effort to crush it, and what you're left with is a fine powder. Many folks use the fine powder into their dishes, but even more traditionally, the term we use is we bloom it. We bloom it, and this is where I always have to differentiate between my mother's generation and the cool, hip, trendy kids, what they're doing these days. My mom would pour hot water in it, and that's how she would bloom it, much like a tea. The cool, hip generation drop an ice cube in there. And actually, ice cube makes more sense to me because when you think about black tea versus green tea, you drop the temperature down for green tea. You don't boil and burn those delicate little leaves. And this is a lot more delicate than green tea, so you definitely want to be mindful of that. So for the book, just to not go into this long story, I just said pour hot water in it. But when I teach classes, I just use tap water. Since I'm not my mother's age, nor am I the cool, hip, trendy kids, so I'll split the difference and land on room temperature water. But to show you what this will look like, I always like to demonstrate it in a clear glass so you can see. There's the powder, which is just a red powder. But when you add water to it, that is what saffron is. And that is what you pay a lot of money for because it's aromatic, it is colorful, and it has such a unique flavor that adds complexity to the dishes. So that is saffron. Rice, I'm going to turn it all off. Can you see how elongated the grain are? Maybe if I put it against the backdrop. Well, so they really are long grained. So that's done. And I'm going to take turn to drain the colanders or the pots into the colander. Having a fine mesh is probably a little bit better than a coarser colander because a lot of rice could get through. I poured a little water in here. It'll heat up the water because the pan was really nice and hot. It'll allow me to pick up whatever was left inside the pot and gives me another opportunity to rinse those pesky starch out of the way. Same with this guy. I may be able to fit it all in here. I may not. Let's see. That's a bit of a stretch. Oh my goodness. We have a little rice to eat tonight. And if I put this inside, it will continue to drain. Beautiful. To make, and I do this every time I teach a class, or certainly every time I have guests over, I really want to showcase the rice. I really want to highlight the use of saffron. I really want this to be a lasting impression on my guest about how this beautifully simple ingredient can be elevated to such an extent that it could be a showstopper all on its own. To do so, you would need a non-stick pot. So hold that thought while I tend to this to make sure this is behaving itself. It's turning better. It's getting there. Obviously got a bit to go. I think I might actually combine them. I think at this point, I will combine them. That way I have one pot to watch. The thing about Iranian rice is that obviously we talked about light and fluffy in the center. But what is that thing that happens on the bottom of the pot? Tahdig, right? So tahdig is the Persian word that describes that crispy rice on the bottom of the pot. It sounds so otherly and so, my least favorite word, exotic. But what tahdig actually is, it's two Persian words combined together. Ta is bottom, dig is pot, It literally means bottom of the pot. So long before I was saturating Instagram with hashtag Tahdig, my mother was making rice in the bottom of the pot. So to make the Tahdig, you have to think forward and backward. And what I mean by that is this is the pot that I'm going to cook the rice in. So I would like enough rice in the bottom of the pan tossed with saffron, such that by the time I've laid it out here, it's just a thin layer. So for now, I'm only working to build the crust, the crispy part of it. So I look at this and I say, okay, I will probably need, and this is not rocket science, I'm just eyeballing it. I'm like, okay, give me this much rice.
It really is fluffy.
It is fluffy. I was not kidding. I mean, I seriously meant business. It has to be light and fluffy. So I'm thinking this is probably enough to put a thin layer of rice in the bottom of the pan. So to make rice crispy, you would need a little bit of oil. If your pan is this wide, you need more oil because you have more surface to crisp up. If your pan is narrower, you just need a little less. So this allows me to never have to measure things, so I just eyeball it. So I have a neutral oil. I'm going to use my avocado oil again. And I'm just going to put 2, 3, 4 tablespoons of oil, depending on the size of my pan. But the test is, do this. You want the entire pan to be lightly covered. There's no standing oil, but every part is sufficiently covered with a thin layer of oil. I think if I just give it that, it will be even tastier. Okay, so now I'm going to take some of the saffron, put it in. So that looks like enough oil. I have added my saffron, and look what happens. This is what saffron does to rice. It turns it into this beautiful golden color and very aromatic. So not only I'm getting the rich basmati aroma, but I'm also getting some of the saffron to make it extra special. Now you then put the whole thing in. Lightly spread it out so that you have just a thin layer of rice covering the bottom of the pan. So I'm just lightly pressing it, no squishing, no pushing, pulling, no exerting, just adding the rice. This will be what's called bottom of the pot Tahdig. Then all you have to do is, and again, notice how I transfer the rice into the pot. Lightly, and I exaggerate this just a touch so that it drills into that this needs to be light-handed. I truly fluff it into the pan instead of dumping it into the pan. And again, bear with me as I am exaggerating it to make a point. But a light-handed approach will ensure you have light and fluffy when your guests arrive. Or when you're having your meal. Forget the guests. Okay? Something like this. So there's a couple of more stages to this. I'll wait. But I would like one person to come up and help me make the other Tahdig. Don't make me point. Somebody come up. It's more exciting than dicing onion, I tell you. One person, just one person. Please. Thank you. You get extra baklava, you get extra rice.
Worth it.
Perfect. So I'm just going to give you the saffron. Grab some rice as a point of reference. This is your pot. So use your senses. See how much rice you need to take out of that and put into your bowl, and then lightly mix. So while you do that, I will continue talking about what happens next with this rice. So between our two pots, we're going to split this evenly. My goal is to make Iranian food more accessible. If my mother was doing this, she will have added 3.5, 4.5, 10.5 other steps to it. So I often feel like I need to acknowledge traditions will have it in a different way, and I know enough to create shortcuts. And no one has walked off my table and say, oh, this rice is not good. And instead of the whole raising the temperature and then waiting to add the water and oil, I embrace my fate and I add the oil and water right at the beginning, and I cook it at one dial the whole time for 45 minutes. So, yes, it takes that long on the right temperature for the crispy rice to develop. Looking good. That is looking brilliant. You've done this a time or two.
No, but I'll do it again.
Excellent. Lovely. Thank you very much.
That's it?
Thank you. Yay. Perfect. Well done. Now it's just a matter of splitting the rice between the two pots. Did I make enough rice? My Persian friends would say, oh my God, no, you didn't. And you would say, oh my God, who's going to eat all of this rice? So there is our rice. What is left there to do? Cook it. Yes, water and oil. Yes, of course we need to cook it. And a couple of tablespoons of oil on top. And about a 1/4 cup of water, which is about 4 tablespoons of water on top. Highly scientific. Be sure to measure everything. Well, if you're making it for the first time, be sure to measure everything. But if you're used to me making mistakes, there we are, about 3-4 tablespoons of water. Now you put the lid and cook it, except the last thing I will tell you about the lid is you must have towels on hand. Why? Why do you have towels on hand? So every Iranian household, we don't actually use towels. We have pre-fitted cloth with a rubber band, elastic band that you slip the lid into it, and it just kind of snugs it nicely. If you have 5 people over, you have the right lid. If you have 25 people, you have the right pot with the right lid for it. Since we don't have any of the above, a clean kitchen towel and or even paper towel will do the job. So pull it back, particularly for those of us with gas stoves. You don't want any towels drooping over anywhere. So you just assemble it up here, and this serves a couple of purposes. The language we use around preparing this rice is that we are steaming the rice. So remember that 4 tablespoons of water that I added? I want to make sure that that doesn't evaporate away, particularly with lids that have a hole in it. Right? That will just be the worst for Persian rice cooking. So be sure to have this to maintain the steam in here. And another purpose it serves is, as the rice is cooking and the steam is rising, it's going to, condensation is going to form around the lid, and then it's going to drip back down. Having the towel prevents water going in. When rice is cooked in water, it gets sticky. When it's steamed, it stays light and fluffy. So when you do this, one of the most conversations or questions I get is, how do I know? How do I know? And the reality is, you will never know. You will never know. This is a practice in trust, following your recipes, and making sure your first one is your learning curve. So the things I would like for you to not to do is I'll exaggerate. Under no circumstance you shall lift the lid. I'm really just dialing it all up here. If you lift the lid, the world won't end, but why would you? What do you think is happening here when you lift the lid? Take a picture of it. It will look exactly the same in 10 minutes, in 20 minutes, in 40 minutes, in 50 minutes. It's the stuff on the bottom that we have no idea. And taking the lid off will give you no insight to the bottom of the pan. And if you listen and don't lift the lid, then you won't be tempted with what I qualify as the unmentionable. Stirring. That we would have to break up if you stir. Because it serves no purpose. It serves absolutely no purpose. As a matter of fact, it may make things even a little worse because steam naturally rises through the way the grains are lightly plopped on top of one another. When you stir, you actually collapse these more. And so the bottom layer tends to be a little bit more on the denser side when you do that. So you have zero incentive to stir. If you lift the lid because you're a curious soul, do it once or twice, but don't do it again. But under no circumstances, stir the rice. All right, you are simmering. The color is still very pale. Now, how do I know? Is this cooking? Is this not cooking? Well, gently touch the pot. It's warm. It's not quite hot yet, and that's fine. It's only been for a few minutes. I don't want to just get overly excited and crank the heat up yet. I'm not going to lift the lid. For the first 10 minutes, I don't make any adjustments. I start with what I think is the right temperature, and then I will look to see, is this warm enough, and how much action is happening up above. I should see a little bit of steam coming through. If nothing is happening in 15 minutes, I definitely need to bump up the temperature. And if it's a lot of steam like this, then I know that my temperature is really high and I need to bring it down. Okay, so we covered the very simple process of making Iranian rice, just a few steps, but I hope that it's a very rewarding experience, as well as one of the very classic Iranian stews that every household has their own twist to them. I've seen folks do grape molasses added in there, so there's just a wide range of flavors and ingredients you can add. But this is just the most basic, trimmed down, but not trimmed down in flavor approach. Yeah? And now that it's cooked for a while, I can see some oil surfacing to the top, and I know the chicken is no longer raw. I can start tasting it. I can say, all right, where are we with this new pomegranate molasses I picked up that I don't remember how it's going to taste or what it's going to do? And knowing that it is, at this point, it's practically a soup, it really needs to keep cooking down. I know I have at least 45 minutes. I wish I had 2.5 hours, but we're going to make it work. And I will talk about how you make adjustments for an Iranian stew, because having the right texture is the key. If you serve a stew too stiff, people will talk. If you serve your stew too runny, they will talk more. Right. I like the flavor. The texture, the consistency is not there. So we got obviously 45 minutes, so I'm not worried. But let's say if this was 10 minutes before serving, and I'm looking at this and I say, wow, there's a lot of liquid in there. You didn't do anything wrong per se. All you need to do is know how to make the adjustment. And the adjustment isn't rocket science. Tilt the lid, turn the flame up a little bit. Bring it down to the right consistency. I like for you to imagine your plate. On one side there is your rice, and on the other side you put the stew. You should indeed have some broth go under the rice, but the rice should not be floating. So that's the visual of the right consistency for Iranian rice stews. Not too dense, not too runny. Because if it is either, people will talk, right? Okay, rice is cooking for 45 minutes. The stew is cooking to get the right consistency. I think this might be a good time for us to take a little break. Let's take a break. Ready for prime time? All right. So the stew is still lagging behind. The flavor was just a little light. I added more of the other bottle of pomegranate molasses. We're learning the difference between the two bottles, and next time I won't use that bottle. I'll use the thicker one, so no concentrate. Stick with the molasses. And wherever you may shop, you may not get this. So this is a challenge. I'm going to be mindful of our time. It is late, getting later. And so I will accept and embrace what we have, knowing if this was in my own kitchen, I'll probably cook it another half hour or so because we had to take a bit of a detour with the pomegranate molasses. But that is the nature of food and cooking. All right, now it's starting to get a little denser on the bottom, so I'm going to definitely not keep the flame too high. It's getting there, but it's not there. So if this I serve to my Iranian guests, they'll be like, oh, Omid, that stew was amazing. Did you see what he served? So I'm going to own it and accept it. This rice is ready because it's been the right time, and I can lift the lid. Is the tahdig set? I will never know until I flip it, right? Yeah, I can hear it, right? So, how do you want to do this? You want a plate or platter larger than your pot, particularly if you have a big pot, because when you flip it, the rice should stay, but if it's really a tower, it will inevitably fall over. So, and realistically, you're never going to cook that much for your first time. So, pretend that's my rice pot. And this is the pot, the plate that I'm going to put on top. First, check to see if the handles are handleable. They do get hot, right? So you're going to put your thumbs on the plate and secure the rest of your fingers to the lid so that everything is tightly secured, right? And then what you need to do, thank you, bring it up to about chest level. This is going to have to get flipped. So if you don't lift it enough, give you enough space, this will happen, and the rice, and you will panic, and the rice will panic, and it will just not be a good thing. You don't need to do like a kettlebell swing over your head. Just bring it up to your chest level, somewhere in this region. And you do this, my words that I use is quickly, carefully, but more importantly, confidently. So don't, and to make sure you have light and fluffy, right? So you bring it up, chest level, and you flip it. Soften your knees. Land. Release. Then go back and slowly lift this up. And I do this crazy slow motion because I have seen plenty, shall we say. So I have learned, oh, these will be really helpful for someone who wasn't bringing themselves down, and someone who wasn't lifting it high enough, or someone brought it down and was quick to lift it up, and the rice just spilled all over the place. So that's the kind of the exaggerated, ridiculous slow motion. Bear with me. This will be the rice I have never made on this stove and this pot and all of this before. So chest level. Yeah. Slowly bring it down. Lift up and slowly. Oh. Despite all odds. Well, not odds, but you know, first time is your first time.
Oh, wow, it's good actually.
So if I was to critique it, I'm like, oh, I would have wanted a little less of these. But you know what? For tonight, I'm going to say that's a win. So that is how I like to serve Iranian rice. And just this humble grain, this is what I think of it. This humble grain could connect us over the appreciation of good food, traditions, and learning about each other's traditions. So I appreciate that you're interested and invested in connecting over rice. While I do this, I'm also continuing to cook the rice, every last second of it. So I am definitely getting bragging rights for the amount of oil that is surfaced to the top, right? That's what we would say. The term we use in Persian is جا افتاده. جا افتاده is often hard to describe or translate, but literal translation would mean it has fallen into place. It has set. So Persian food, like the way my mom would let the rice sit, you will never just cook the stew and piping hot and put it into the pan and bring it to the table. You will allow the stew to calm down, settle, جا افتاده, to fall into place, and the oil will surface. You can then determine how much bragging rights you get as you then bring it to the table. So it's often never served piping hot right out of the pot. All right, and there's the rice. Let me pour the stew in here. Oh, yes. Okay. All right, so that is done, and it definitely needs a tidying up before it's ready to be brought out.
Yes.
Okay, we managed. We managed. Oh wait, there's the knife test. I'm making this up. It's a sound effect test. This is crispy. Well, folks, we have rice, we have fesenjoon, we have sabzi khordan, and hopefully we have lots of hungry bellies that like to get a taste and sample of this food. This is what I like to do. I like to teach. I love being with people, and I love sharing stories. I never knew, unlike my friend who was actually trained to be a storyteller, Marjan, who was supposed to be here with us, but she's sick. I am an ad lib. I remember the first time I taught a cooking class. I stood in front of the class. I didn't know what I was doing, and it dawned on me, oh my God, I have fear of public speaking. Teach. So that was in 1999. Since then, I found a way to share of myself, to share of this cuisine, to share of this culture, and find a way, and I think going to therapy school, being a therapist really helped, allowing me to just connect to people. You may not cook this food, but we're already connected through this shared activity and share an appreciation of good food. So, as I've indicated in some of your books, there are two ways that we invite people to arrive at the table. One is Iranian hospitality is next level. Sometimes like it will take 2 hours to just, no, you go first, no, you go first. So to call people to arrive to the house or to the table, we say, بفرمایید, please arrive, please come, please join. And once you've settled into your place, then to welcome you to a meal, we would say نوش جان. And نوش جان, literal translation would be, may your soul be nourished. So I hope your souls are nourished. بفرمایید and نوش جان. Yeah. Thank you.